Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Toby Demker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast. It's the last podcast of 2022. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we tend to talk about some personal development and professional development and even a little bit of philosophy. So how are you today, Toby? How are the holidays treating you?
I'm really good. I'm still full after the holidays. It's just been eating and having a good time. So yeah, no, but it's I'm in a good space. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, before we launch into our topic for today, I actually had an afterthought. At the last podcast we did, I was
Mm.
taught when we were talking about environments and so on, and we were talking about how I made a reference to the environment in some of these German discount supermarkets, right? There are these
Oh yeah.
discounters,
Mm.
and I, after that conversation, I thought I want to challenge my assumption, and so it was. I actually happened to be. It was more convenient to go to one of those shops, and
Mm.
and wouldn't you know, like right the same day after we did that recording, I went. It just happened to be I went into one of those shops and everybody was super friendly, so after that I was thinking I really want to, challenge my assumption here because, otherwise I'm
Mm.
just going to think that was an exception. And so for the following, 10 days, I went regularly to those kind of shops. And it looks like I just had some biases there because none of those experiences that I had in my memory. So
Mhm.
I've had this talking to people before where we'll talk about something where they'll say this always happens to me. I had
Yeah.
one coaching client who she said, this always happens to me, and we went back and we looked at, well, what was the first time you remember it happening and what was the second time, and that it
Mm.
only had ever happened twice.
Yeah.
And so even as coaches we are vulnerable to our own biases sometimes. And so
Yeah,
anyway,
for sure.
for the
Of
record, I
course.
wanted
Yeah,
to
we're
correct that.
we're humans. But kudos to you for challenging your assumptions on that.
Yeah,
You know,
so
that's good.
it was funny. It was just kind of I don't know, fate, whatever, that I ended up going to this one shop right on the same day as I made those comments on our last podcast recording, and sure enough, the opposite of what I said had happened, right? And so
Yeah.
so that made me go, well, actually, maybe it's time for me to you know check my. And this is the thing, I'm a big believer in creating a personal philosophy and so on,
Mm.
and that philosophy continues to evolve, and so mine does as well. So all of my beliefs, I try and challenge them when they're not working for me and make sure they're still the right thing in my philosophy. So anyway.
Yeah, that's great.
So
Well,
yeah,
staying true to the cause, kind of thing.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah. So anyway, I think that actually segues nicely into our topic because a little bit of a reflection on my beliefs is something I do regularly, especially at the end of the
Mm.
year. So and I think that's kind of where you want to take us today. But I'll leave it to you to.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's the end of the year, and I think last year we also had some kind of a New Year's thing, and I think we were talking about more about visioning then and looking ahead. But I
Mm,
thought we would take the opportunity to talk about from two perspectives, or at least two perspectives. Let's see what happens. But talk about the importance of reflection, and then maybe do a little bit of a reflection of the year. And I think this is really interesting because it's becoming more and more clear to me that all kinds of successful people that I meet, and you can be successful in very various ways, but the people that I don't want to get into definition of success here, but people that I view as successful and in terms of where they are in life and where they want to be, they have one thing in common, and that they're really good at creating time for themselves to reflect on things. So it's about, and you and I work with training and development, and I see people that are really good at implementing stuff. So what they do, they learn a little bit and then they stop and reflect on how can I utilize this, and they do it, and then they stop and look back and always kind of refining. But creating that time, and that seems to be one of the most challenging things for people out there in the world today, at least in the professional field, because people are very busy and there's a lot of expectations, and we're just going on and on and on. But taking that time out and stop and looking back at, okay, so how am I actually doing? What do I have to tweak? And it's about creating that space for yourself. That's something that I'd like to talk about. So perhaps some techniques, how can you do that? So some ideas about how do you do it, and also of course the import of doing it, rather than just going on autopilot and just doing stuff as you do on and on and on, and then life goes by and we stop. Oh, what happened here?
Yeah. Well, maybe we can start with, why reflection is important and some elements of it, and then kind of finish up with, or the second half of the podcast, maybe talk about some good techniques or ways to support reflection, if that's okay with you. It kind of seems like a logical way to do it.
Yeah.
I think your point is right, though. In the trainings we do and so on, one of the techniques that's quite popular at the moment is, especially in part of agile working principles is Scrum, and that's definitely one where you do things in iterations, and then you come back together and you talk about it, and that's a form of reflection as well. And so I think the whole idea of the idea of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, and I think without reflection that's what happens. We don't even recognize that we're contributing to why is this always happening to me, and yet it's because we keep doing the same thing that leads to that result, right? So I think reflection is a key component in growth and learning and improving your life. So without taking that time for reflection in whatever form that you need, and this is part of living a very busy life, is it's very difficult, and this is kind of why I think people get on this hectic track. There's actually a friend of mine here who moved to Switzerland who wrote a book called the hamster wheel is not motorized, or something like that. I'm pretty sure that was the title, and it's very fitting because we get into this hamster wheel and we don't take the time to reflect on what's important to us, and all of a sudden when we do reflect, maybe it's years later and we realize, oh my God, this is not where I wanted to be, or I haven't taken the time for that. And sometimes it's a crisis situation, or we lose someone close to us, or we have our own kind of health issue, and then we start to reflect, right? And I think, hopefully it doesn't take a crisis for you to reflect on, are you doing the things you want to be doing? Are you living the life you want to live? Or even little things, what little adjustments can you make to make improvements in your life, or to continue, or because a lot of the projections looking into the future, a lot of things are done based on modeling, like the environment, or where are we going with people dispute whether we have a population issue, because some models show us population continuing to explode, and then there's someone like Elon Musk that says actually we've got a population underpopulation problem, because aging population, and it's only going to take one generation for our like China, I think, is a big problem with that, because in 1 or 2 generations they could all of a sudden have half the population or something like that. I've heard theories, right? So the thing is with a lot of these models, all you need is a few calculations wrong, and your model over time becomes worse and worse. And so if you don't stop to recheck your assumptions and reflect on those, I think you can, if you just assume that the decisions you made now, and this is the same with philosophy, if you think if your beliefs are meant to carry you through the rest of your life without reflecting on them, at some point they're no longer going to be relevant, right? So I think in all of those areas, reflection is super important and can have pretty big consequences if you don't take the time to do it.
Yeah. Obviously, I totally agree. That's I think we're talking about this because we both think it's important. But we can also, because when we're talking about reflection now, so what are we actually talking about? Because there's a difference between talking about reviewing, so just looking back. There's a difference of referring, when you sort of have standard points that you kind of compare with. So reviewing or referring or reflecting, it's kind of different things. So for me, when we're talking about reflecting, it's really going deep enough to connect with your own emotions and in your own experiences. So it's not only, when I'm thinking about reflection, it's not only reviewing back, okay, so what happened during the year. If you the element of reflection, it incorporates the idea of how did I feel at that point? What happened to me then? What made me feel that way? What made me react in a certain way? And that for me takes a lot of both courage and practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I see this a lot when we do kind of reflecting in groups and trainings, that it's very easy to just, well, I'll get into review mode and sort of review, oh, that was interesting. Yeah, that was good. And there's kind of a judgment in it. But
Mm.
going into when you're reviewing something, reflect on what it meant to you. I think that's a really different aspect of it, and that's much more difficult. So, for instance, when I had such and such experience, I felt happy or sad, or I felt overwhelmed, or whatever it is. And okay, well, so what does that mean to me? For me, that's reflection.
Mm.
And that's on a that's it takes a lot of practice to get there.
I agree with you, and I think what people sometimes think is, as you say, there's a difference between kind of just a review and reflection, that's a lot of people don't go below the surface level. It's very superficial the way they jump to conclusions. They think, okay, well, I took a minute to think about it, and here's the conclusion I've come to, and they don't go any deeper than that. And for me as well, it's, when you're talking about reflection, it's not just, do I like the outcomes, but have I been living by my values? What are my values? Or those kind of things which we've talked about in other podcasts. Or it can be, how is this, like you say, how is this affecting me emotionally, not just mentally, right? I think this is a big topic that I've thought about for years, is this whole idea that we've come so far technologically. Humanity has come so far technologically. We have all these, and I think it's gotten us to a point where we think that technology will solve all of our problems, right? Whether it's a pill or a gadget or whatever. And the thing is, but we haven't really evolved on an emotional level. It's almost like we, think about if you were to put weapons of mass destruction in the hands of chimpanzees, right? So they if they had the ability to push a button, yet they don't have the emotional intelligence to realize the ramifications of it. I mean, maybe that's a stupid example, but I'm just saying, we have all these gadgets, and yet and this is another topic I wanted to talk about in terms of reflection, is reflecting on an individual level, and then reflecting, as a culture, as communities, we need to be reflecting on where we are going as as nations, as a world, as a community. I think reflecting on that at that level is really important as well, because when you look at things like, we've all of the technologies. I was recently having this conversation about, back in the 50s, they were talking about progress, and technology was going to get us to a point where we'd have endless amounts of leisure time. And look at how far we've come since the 50s in technology, and yet we're working harder than ever, longer days than ever, and a lot of the technology we've gotten, like look at email, it sure improved our ability to send messages back and forth, hasn't improved the communication all that much, because on an emotional level, that's why we still give workshops on communication, even though people have all the tools to communicate, they still don't communicate well. And so I think this process of reflection, it's important on so many different levels, individually, but societally. I don't think there's enough. There's a lot of reaction and not enough reflection, because we we have all the technology. We've come so far on a mental level, but on a spiritual level or an emotional level, we're still, where's the wisdom in a lot of the decisions we make or the decisions we make as a society? I think when you look at technology, like we've come so far in medicines, and yet we have this we have this epidemic of mental illness, right? I mean, when you look at the rates of depression and things like that, and the pill's not going to solve that because it doesn't take care of the source issue, right? Yeah. And so all of these things point to a lack of reflection, a lack of deeper reflection on what are our values, what are we trying to achieve, where are we trying to get to. Are we even happy with the direction things are going? People complain a lot, they point fingers, but they don't reflect deeply on themselves, on their contribution to the things that they perceive as problems, and reflecting on where are we going as it could be an organization, it could be society, it could be, where are we going as a species, right? And so I think some of those kind of things kind of may hurt your head to think to reflect on, but so it's a good place to start with yourself for sure, but then also encourage in groups and communities to reflect on, in organizations. We work a lot with organizations, and if they don't take the time to reflect on, who are we? What's our identity? This is why, I like Simon Sinek, start with why. Why do we do what we do? And ask ourselves, who are we as an organization, or who am I as a person? I think all of those things are important topics to reflect on and to find more wisdom in life. And, because we have a lot of intelligence, we've developed a lot of our intelligence, but, just like you say, the analytical review of things is not the same as the sort of deeper emotional review of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you really brought this up to a higher level. No, that's great.
Made it more complicated.
I really do agree. I mean, in not so many years ago in the Western world, every Sunday we went to church, and you had your reflection time then, and perhaps it was a bit steered into in one direction. I'll let everybody make their own judgments about that. But at least it was a physical space. It was a physical time for your reflection and thinking about wider important things in life. As you're saying, on a personal level, on a societal level, in an organizational level, we're drowning in quantity. In terms of, as you say, communication, information overload, blah, blah, blah. So how do you deal with all of this? And how do you make sense of it so it's something that you can work with and also want to work with? That's really where it fits in as well. And I totally agree on this. On the societal level, that I have ideas about how we should improve our debating climate to allow more time for reflection, looking at what is the common view, what do we want to achieve as collectively, rather than shouting about our differences, because that's kind of where we go. And that it is that lack of reflection. We don't allow ourselves with the time or space to do it, and to do it with quality. So I really do think that it's super important on all these different kind of levels. So it's really about, okay, so how can we create space for ourselves to do it? But I also agree that there are, obviously it's easiest to start on the individual level to do it by ourselves, but also do it with our teams and in organizations. But then teams maybe is the next level. So how do we do, for instance, in our trainings, we work a lot with group reflection, but really they're challenging the participants to, okay, what do we mean by reflection, and how do you help yourself and the group by being constructively challenging about a group reflection, and ask follow-up questions. So, what happened there? What did that mean to you? I noticed something there. To really challenge each other to go into that space. And when that happens, that's amazing. For me, that's where the real kind of learning happens in these kind of group processes.
Yeah, and it's not even just in organizations and on an individual level, but within our relationships, we can do a lot of reflection. Where are we happy with whether it's a family or whether it's a romantic relationship or within friendships, am I being the best friend that I can be? Am I, these are things that we don't often take the time to reflect on. There will be odd times where we get triggered on things, but I think this is when we think about the things that are a barrier to our own ability to reflect or our incentive to reflect. We again, coming back to this point of we're very smug, and we could use maybe a little humility in the sense that we think that we've gotten so smart, we're the smartest species on the planet, and all this stuff, and what contributes to that is we also have these now with our modern modes of communication. We also have these echo chambers, and where we say things that are reflected back to us, and it confirms how right we are, how smart we are, and so on, and all the while getting us farther off track or farther polarized, and so this, I think, this both contributes to a lack of reflection because, well, everyone I'm listening to says the same as me, so I must be on the right track. So there's no incentive to reflect. And so there's just, we'll seek more and more confirmation rather than going within. And I think this whole trying to solve our problems based on, it's funny. I was just having this conversation over the break, and I was talking about one of my, I guess I would consider him a mentor, even though I didn't know him personally. But Wayne Dyer, read a lot of and listened to, and one of the things he said is, we're looking for external solutions for internal problems, and this is the thing. When we look outside of ourselves, it's the opposite of reflection, right? I think. Your point is really good when you were clarifying what you meant by reflection, because we may review, we may look outward, and we may pass judgment, but I think reflection is really going within, and this is why things and I think meditation helps you get you in a mental state, but it's not the same as reflection, right? Because people talk about meditation sometimes, and what they mean is contemplation. So I think that's an important thing to consider, the things that are sort of getting in the way of your own ability to reflect and your own desire to reflect. I think the other thing that stands in the way of why people don't reflect is because, and I encountered this over the years in personal development work, where people have a sense of fear of looking within. They don't want to go there. I don't want to go to my. And again, this isn't work I do as a coach, but people are afraid to look at their traumas, right? Or they're afraid to, but beyond that, when you're kind of reviewing or reflecting on yourself, they don't like to look at their weaknesses. And that there's almost the sense that there's something dark and terrible and ugly inside. If I look deeply enough, I'll find that and I won't like it. And I think that fear of what could be within us is another thing that can maybe block us from wanting to reflect and looking within. And I think those are the things maybe that might be the first thing to look at, is what's getting in the way of me reflecting. Obviously, there's the time components. One, we don't make it a big enough a priority, but one of the reasons we're not making it a priority may be because, well, if I stop to reflect, then why do people seek all these distractions? Whether it's like shopping or all the things that people will do to distract themselves, and the distraction is kind of the opposite. It's an avoidance of reflection in many cases. So
yeah. I mean, it's like if you try to coach someone who doesn't want to be coached, it doesn't work, right?
Exactly.
And I do think that a lot of people, I have a lot of friends that are not interested, and it might be. I'm not gonna sort of digest or analyze why that's the case, but I think in a lot of cases, it's no interest, or it might be a little bit of a fear of what's going to happen if I open up in that way, or if I look inside. So maybe it's not for everybody, but it seems like as I said, for people that I view as really successful, it's been really it's been a real sort of change, well, a game changer for them. That's what sets them out from everybody else that I look at in terms of. I mean, I don't want to define success here, but sort of going with a self-development team that they develop quickly and they're interested in that, and for me, that's one part of being successful, at least.
Yeah. Well, I think reflection is helpful for everyone, but not everyone's ready for it, I guess. Or, like you say, there needs to be a willingness there. So, I think I would encourage everyone to find time for personal reflection.
But then also thinking about, sorry if I'm hijacking the conversation,
No,
but
no.
I mean, we work so much with leaders and leadership development, and if you're put in that position where you're having a direct influence on people's working environments and their work, and with your stakeholders, if you're not willing to look at your own, reflect on yourself, how are you going to be able to reflect on if you're making a good job with your stakeholders and the other people that you're working with? So I think when we come to that kind of level, it's essential. It's a must.
Absolutely.
You have to do it.
Absolutely. And I think it's, if you want, especially if you're in a leadership role, but if you're in a position where other people rely on you, or if you if you are making big decisions that affect a lot of other people, it's essential to be able to reflect on yourself and reflect on things like your assumptions and the decisions you're making, and what's your motivation behind those. And I mean, there's an endless list of things that to be reflected on, but certainly your own happiness. If there are, when people think about the reasons they're unhappy, they often give the reasons as being external ones, right? And yet, the truth of the matter is 99% of it is internal, right? It's the way you perceive things, or the decisions you've made. Often you've led yourself into the situations that are making you unhappy. So we give other things and other people the responsibility for our happiness, and if we took the time to reflect, we'd realize that's actually not the case.
Yeah, for sure. So okay, so it is important. It's very beneficial for your self-development. It can be perhaps beneficial for your health or for your sanity.
Absolutely.
I would believe that as well. And it's beneficial for your stakeholders as well, because you take them into account of what your relationships are, and how do you treat each other, how do you deal with different people, how do you deal with perhaps difficult situations, where are things going well, what's happening in those. So, I mean, there's so many elements of that in terms of in your ecosystem, so to say. So it's not only about yourself. What do you do to reflect?
Well, I think we've already pointed to the one, taking the time. I'm fortunate. So first of all, I don't have any kids. Okay, my girlfriend's got a daughter, and she's in my life now. But I have, in terms of demands on my time, with the travel that I do, during those periods of travel, I have time to reflect. When I sit on a plane, I see people have their screens and they're watching movies and stuff they've downloaded from Netflix or whatever. I think recognizing that there are lots of moments, just like there are moments to meditate. Like sometimes, I have a little app on my phone where it'll give me a 10 or 15 minute, I'll set for myself to meditate. And sometimes it'll be, I'm in a plane and, they've given the security announcements and everything, and can't get my laptop open yet. So I'll take 15 minutes and I'll just take that time to meditate. And that's just getting myself into a state where I can reflect. So I think there's plenty of things I do, whether it's a walking nature, like changing my environment, right? I think one of the things, because we were talking about things that get in the way of reflection, and like the echo chambers and the bubbles and so on, but also the state that we were in can be can, if our mind is too busy, it's hard to reflect clearly, right? So for me, going for a walk in nature is a great time. Sometimes, you've talked many times about running, right, and how that helps clear your mind. I think the getting yourself into a state to reflect is important. So meditation is a great one, and then reflect after the meditation, or when you recognize that you're in a very neutral state or you're in a calm emotional state. That's a good time to reflect. A lot of times people don't want to do it when they're feeling good. They don't want to reflect on stuff that maybe less, that's going to put them in a bad mood. But when you are in those positive mental states, that's a perfect time to start reflecting, because then you can be honest with yourself. You can be hopefully less emotional, and you can start to reflect on things that way. So I think really getting yourself in the right state to reflect is a really important one. And then there are lots of techniques, which I'm sure we'll get to, but that's what I find is really important for me, is getting myself in the mental state where I can reflect in an objective way, because I have a pretty strong inner critic as well, and so if there's a ton of mental chatter talking about, if I start to reflect then, and I'm in a poor state, or some things have gone wrong, and I use that as the moment to try and reflect, then there's just going to be a whole lot of self-criticism. There's not going to be any objective or neutral or fair, balanced reflection that's going on. So yeah, getting into the right state, I think, is kind of the first big step in some quality reflection.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like the importance of being in a good space to be able to actually reflect. I mean, it's because it sounds so easy, right? Oh, let's reflect on this, but to do it when you're in the right state of mind, and for it to be productive, perhaps you have to put yourself in the right space, and I think that's also something that we can actually practice. Going into that, finding that zone. It's I can't explain it. I think what happens that I don't know if, again, I don't want to make any references if I'm good or bad at it, but going into a zone, like when you go into a bubble and you allow yourself to be with your own thoughts, I think it does take a lot of practice, and maybe especially, as they're saying, in this world of being sort of online all the time, or just being surrounded by an information flow. There's so much things going on. So being able to sort of cut things off and just enter a bubble of where you are yourself. And I think, you have your different kind of techniques for doing that. As I said, I like running. I know a lot of people like meditation, doing yoga or whatever. And actually, in the professional sort of environment, with nowadays it's all surrounded by Teams. I just learned that there's something called focus time on Teams, where it allows you to just block certain things where you can focus on, and that's a really good opportunity to at least schedule your reflection time and work on yourself, and not being externally bothered by other meetings and stuff all the time.
Yeah, there's a number of companies now that are doing some good work around mental health and finding time to taking breaks and go for a walk, and also this deep focus time, right? Because there is enough knowledge, and there's been enough books written now that about deep work and about the ability to focus, and the things that are going to contribute to that. And so the smart employers are doing those kind of things, creating the right environment, but also encouraging people to take that time. Because if all you're doing all day is just working through your emails and your to-do lists, where is the kind of focus time? And the thing is, taking time to, especially if you're in a leadership role, right? But it doesn't not just limit to that. Any individual person who has kind of goals and aspirations, and those should include some milestones on the way there. And when you reach those milestones, that's exactly the time to reflect as well, right? So So I think, it's great if you've got people around you, if you've got an employer, or if you've got people around you that encourage you to take some time for yourself, some me time, whatever. And then the thing is, when you do get the opportunity, don't just distract yourself. Don't watch when you have those blocks of free time where you could reflect. People will turn on the TV, or they'll do something that's kind of mind numbing in order to, because that's seen as relaxing. But actually, taking time in a calm state to reflect can be so much more liberating and rejuvenating than shutting off and watching something that's mildly entertaining, right? So, and look, there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm not criticizing it, but I'm just saying those are the opportunities. And I think before you turn on your favorite show or do your whatever thing that you think is relaxing, ask yourself, have you taken the time to sort of put yourself in a good mental state and do a little bit of reflection, right? And make that more of a priority.
Yeah. And I think that goes into that practice point. I mean, how can we practice to do this so it doesn't become a burden? I know a lot of people, now it's almost New Year's, people have New Year's resolutions. I know a lot of people that have New Year's resolutions of, I'm going to start writing a diary. And that becomes a thing that you physically have to do and to dedicate a certain amount of time to every day. Fine, that's great. But very often it doesn't work because we don't stick with it. Because it's actually an obligation. You have to physically do it. You have to allocate some time to do it. How about if you can, after a meeting, if you get into that habit of after a meeting, or if you've finished a conversation or project, just getting into the habit of creating a space of reflection of what was the highlight in this meeting. What did I do really well? What happened to me then? What made it feel well? Just asking yourself a few questions. So I mean, when we're talking about reflection, we're talking about going deep, but you can train yourself to go deep quickly and ask just. And for me, it's a lot with connecting to your physical sensations in your body. Like, oh, I feel a little bit, I don't know, sore in my neck now, or I feel a bit tensed over my chest. Okay, what's happening with that? Where is that coming from? What thoughts are connected to that? And very quickly, not always very quickly, but often at least, I can realize that it's becoming from this certain situation, and then you can think about what are the assumptions there, what's happening there, and then you can just deal with it in a productive way. It can be very often, mostly for me, it's a false assumption. It's nothing that's really important, or it's something that I need to work a little bit more on this to make that a priority. But my point here is that reflection doesn't have to be a time-consuming big thing that takes a big chunk out of your day. It's creating that habit of, perhaps it's a minute, perhaps it's 5 minutes, I don't know, but just creating a habit of connecting your thoughts with your physical reactions and asking yourself some questions. What's happening here right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think one of the questions to ask certainly is when to reflect, and for me, they're the moments, the opportunities for learning, those quick moments of reflection, and then there may be deeper moments of reflection, like we're getting to the end of the year, and maybe reflecting on the things that have happened for the year and what you want for the future. When are the opportunities for reflection? Well, certainly, again, first of all, making sure that you're in a good state to reflect objectively, and it doesn't have to be meditation or going for a run. You can just do a quick breathing exercise, right? Whether it's box breathing or whatever. I think generally, if people have techniques to calm themselves down, that's invaluable. But we're not going to go into that today. But the moments where there are opportunities for reflection, when you've had a disagreement, when you've had a fight with someone, right? And so clearly something's gone wrong with the communication. Often we spend time, think about how much time we ruminate on, oh, what an idiot, or or we go, why did I act like such an idiot, right? There's all this judgment So in those periods of time when you would normally spend criticizing and judging, try and get yourself into a calm state and then reflect. Reflect as if you're a neutral observer. You know, in meditation, I encourage people, or I try and get myself into that neutral observer, right? Rather than being sucked into the situation and judging and labeling, just trying to be an observer. So taking the moment to go, okay, what actually happened there, right? Without passing judgment or blame or, letting the emotions get high. So those are those moments where you can really learn it and reflect and go, okay, what did I do there that I could have done differently? Or what could be behind that emotional response from the person I was just communicating with? Or, the decisions I made, what decisions led me to this outcome that I'm not happy with, right? So I think anytime you feel like something goes wrong, the next possible, like obviously sometimes we have to respond or react, but as soon as you have a moment, like the time frame is really important, because as time passes, if we want to reflect on the choices we made last year, that's a long time, can still be helpful. But if the opportunity for reflection when something has an outcome that you don't like, whether it's an argument, like something in a relationship or even in a workspace, or there's something that's gone wrong in a project, or there's something that's gone wrong in your personal life, and just reflecting. So I frequently say opportunity allows change, awareness allows change, and so it's bringing these things, all of our automated things, to the surface so we can look at them, and that's that reflection process where we can say, I realize this is a habit that I have and it keeps coming up. And until that comes to the surface and we're aware of it, we can't change it. And this is the benefit of reflecting objectively without judgment. Because how often do we hear people that say, "Oh man, it's just like that." I recently heard someone say, I get that from my father." It's like, well, what is that? Is that genes? Have they just kind of, that's the typical response, is just to say, well, that's just the way I am. I was born this way or whatever. And that's the fixed mindset rather than the growth mindset. And when you can sit and reflect without judging yourself and say, okay, what happened there? What's the habit that I have? What's the process? What triggers that habit, right? This is kind of the deep reflection that you can do. It may sound like a review process, but a lot of the triggers are our emotions, right? They are the emotions. Or you can ask yourself what needs to have there. Or we can, in communication, when things go wrong, we can look at, the Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, where you talk about, okay, what did I observe, and what's my unmet need in that situation? That you can use a process like that, or you can just kind of be free flowing. But although I think that is a key moment, a key opportunity for reflection, is soon after something has turned out in a way that you're not happy with, or something's turned out really well. Those are also good moments to reflect and say, oh, actually, what did I do right there? This is a unique moment. I wasn't able to achieve that before. How can I practice this more? So those moments when things go really well or poorly, where we want to make a change, that's the time to set some time aside and reflect, in my view.
Yeah, because that's something, in the coaching community that we talk a lot about. We want to be forward looking and bring momentum ahead, and working with our motivation to accomplish things and to make plans and to make actions and holding ourselves accountable. So there's always this balance of looking back versus looking forward, and if you take that on an individual level, thinking about your own reflection, not getting stuck either in reflection and thinking, oh, this, as you said, you talk a lot about the judgment part, and I really agree with that not getting started in judging what's good or bad or whatever, but realizing, creating awareness, as you're saying, through reflection, creating awareness of what is happening in these situations and what would you like to happen. So then going from reflection and perhaps making things easier to make plans and setting goals, and or looking ahead, or what kind of mindset you want to have when you go and enter a similar situation next time or something. So it doesn't have to be about setting physical goals, but what I'm saying, that there's a balance of doing reflection to bring it forward, so kind of thing, and not getting stuck in reflection either. Because I mean, maybe it sounds like, oh, we have to go deep and we have to soul search, and we have to spend a certain amount of time there. um that's not at all what I'm saying, but I think it's important to connect with your own emotions and with yourself, and just creating awareness about that. That's really the reflective part, and then it becomes the interesting part of, okay, so what do we want to do with it now, or
Hmm.
what does this tell me, or what am I learning from this, or whatever, right? So not making it something heavy and negative, rather than something that is yeah, enjoyable and motivating, and creating energy and awareness by yourself.
Yeah, I don't think it's about reliving particular experiences, taking yourself there and just reliving it.
Mm,
I mean, there may be moments when that can be helpful, but but I think it's reflecting on, okay, here's the things I remember, but what did I miss? What are little things that I can, yeah, what else can I take from this? What can I see? What can I, and just seeking understanding and seeking a greater awareness.
mm,
I think those obviously go hand in hand. So there's the things that we pick up on there, and then we focus in on and we grasp onto, but what's in between those things, right? I think that for me is where reflection's super helpful. It's the
mm,
details that we were missing that we can kind of sort through and figure out.
mm.
So, okay,
Well, I
so
guess, well, I
mhm.
mean, just to maybe to summarize, I think, where we are now, it's really about, yeah, creating the awareness of, what have I learned, what are some things that are happening, and then being creating an opportunity to work with it. So, okay, so what will I do next time? And that can be a part of a larger process, but it can also be done as a very quick, small process, asking yourself a few questions, and then, okay, what am I going to do about this right
Yeah, like
now?
making mental notes. And I think obviously the reflection isn't much good to you if you're not going to do anything with it. Um, you know,
Exactly. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Thank you.
sometimes the awareness in itself is enough to motivate you or cause you to make the change. But often, being aware of it, especially if you've noticed it two or three times, then you can go, okay, it's time for me to take action. I see this as a repeating pattern or whatever.
Mm,
So yeah, I think the willingness to do something with what you get out of the reflection is sort of kind of where you want to get to.
mm.
So what about in terms of what we do for reflection? I mean, I've got some ideas. Is there something specific that any kind of process that you take yourself through for reflection? How do you approach it?
Well, yes. No, I mean, fortunately, I'm in the as in this field. I have an opportunity to reflect very often in our
Yeah.
work. Start
Mhm.
with a morning reflection when we're having trainings, or I think in meetings we do a lot of check-ins. I think that's also a really good opportunity to just reflect on where you are, both physically and mentally, and in different environments, perhaps in your professional life, in your private life. So there's different sort of check-in techniques for that. And intention setting, I think I've mentioned before, and then following up on that. So I think I mentioned that a few times, but I every morning, me and my kids, we kind of set a theme for the day. So what's the intention for today? We're going to focus on, and then, as doesn't happen every day, but as often as we can. So, well, how did it go? And I said, oh yeah, that's maybe partly reviewing also. But then, if there's interesting things that come up, then it's an opportunity to reflect perhaps a bit deeper on what's happened. So intention setting and following up on that, reflecting on that, I think that's really, really, really helpful. Um, Occasionally diary writing. For me, when um, it's enjoyable sometimes to just sit and write your thoughts. And I think that for me, I can do that. Happens sometimes in the mornings and sometimes in the evenings. It doesn't have to be a certain time period, but just, yeah, being there with my words and just realizing stuff. For me, I love that process. But again, I'm an introvert, so I like these kind of things when I can work for myself. But obviously, also just having conversations with people that are interested in this kind of stuff. I have luckily, I mean, I have colleagues like yourself where we can talk about things like this, and that's, for me, that's a really great way of reflect on things as well.
Yeah, I think conversations can also be trigger more further reflection. I mean, I'll have a deep conversation with someone. I go, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way before, and then they'll take that away and they'll reflect further on it. So, I think, and obviously the same has happened to me. I'll have a conversation with someone, and they've triggered further reflection in me. So I agree. Conversations are a great one. I think the journaling piece is a good one. I encourage that in a lot of my coaching clients. When they're trying to get clarity or sort things out, a regular journaling practice is really helpful. And some people, there's a great book called The Artist's Way. And it's kind of it's a book that actually encourages people who are not in creative fields to be more creative. It just kind of is a book that can help anyone become more creative, because creativity isn't limited to just artists and creative types. And so one of the first exercises in the book is morning pages, and it encourages you to write every day for 30 minutes. And even if you have nothing to say, just write, you just force yourself to write. Even if you're writing, I don't know what to write. And then pretty soon you'll get beyond that, and you'll open up. So that process is great. It's also a great way of releasing emotions and understanding what you're feeling. If you can get it on the page, right, without judgment, and just kind of whatever comes to mind, this flow of consciousness, this kind of writing, that can really get the juices flowing, and it can kind of help you reflect and get closer to where the issue is. So I think journaling's a really good one. But there's lots of things where people will, throughout the day, will prompt us to reflect. And if we use those prompts, like, just think about how often you ask, oh, how are you today? Well, that's a prompt to reflect. Yeah. How am I doing? Instead we have an automated response to it. Oh, I'm doing well, thanks. Or maybe we'll go, actually not so good. And we'll kind of, complain about our whatever's happening in our life. But we have prompts to cause us to reflect. When people ask us questions and so on. And so those are those quick opportunities. But beyond that, there are lots of things like, a gratitude practice where, at the end of the day, you think about things you're grateful for. Some people have a gratitude diary, right? Yeah. Or a gratitude journal. Just taking moments to be thankful, because we spend lots of time thinking about things we're unhappy with, and then just forcing yourself to have some balance. And when you think about the things that you're grateful for, that can cause you to reflect further on your life as well, right? Not to say, well, actually, I don't need to change anything. I've got lots to be grateful for. It's about recognizing that, well, there are good things in your life, and there are things that you're happy with, and then it helps get you a little clearer on the things that you do want to change. So I think that's a really good practice. And then for me, beyond that, taking time in nature is a really good one. It's not only good for, it's been shown in studies to be good for your health to find some time in nature, whether it's just a city park or, being near the sea. I'm lucky. I've got a big green space right behind my house. And even if you just take 2 minutes to be there and breathe it in, that's a really good thing. And usually that is a good thing to help you then start to reflect, right? Again, the first step is putting yourself in the right state to be able to reflect, and then giving yourself enough time, whether it's just 2-minute reflection or whether you have something bigger to contemplate. Another really important thing about reflection is sometimes it's hard for us to get into that state of reflection when we're in all of our, in a stress situation, or when in our when we're within all of our habits. So that means we're in a certain system or an environment that keeps us. That's sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees because you're just surrounded by all this stuff. And so when people want to reflect on a bigger change, I recommend they remove themselves from their whether it's their comfort zone or their familiar environment, putting themselves in a new situation. When you have a big change in your life, like you're moving house or something, those are also the perfect opportunities to change habits, right? And the same thing goes then for sometimes what's important for reflection is to get out of all your thinking habits, right? So removing yourself either physically or putting yourself in a different mental state. That getting how do you remove yourself from all of your thinking habits? Sometimes it's a different external environment. So I think changing your environment, that's why a getaway for the weekend, it can be important in an environment where it's nature, being by the sea or something like that, or being around less people, so that you can be with your thoughts. I think those are all really helpful things to help you then reflect a little better.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a little bit connected to creating that space. I mean, I really agree with to in your busy schedule to sort of physically or disconnect with that environment. And that's really kind of where we are, or many of us are now when we're in these Christmas times, right? It's actually physically dislocating yourself from the office and being with family and friends, or especially family, I guess, for most people, and just being with your loved ones. But and I think we see this as a theme around Christmas and New Year, that it's time to and being grateful for what we have, and looking back at the year. So I mean, we really get into the space of doing it, which is great. I mean, I love that. I think it's really important. But what I'm challenging here is really, how can we do this much more often, and we don't have to celebrate Christmas to reflect. We can do it, on different kind of occasions as well.
Well, the holidays, it's great that you have that environment. It's not the same for everyone. Sometimes, the holidays is an obligation to get together with your family, and you may not get along with them. And then there's all these whatever issues that come up, that are unresolved issues that come up in disputes. My dad in Canada used to be a fireman, and in Canada, the first responder is the fire department. Yeah. And, when he had to work Christmases, it was, domestic disputes was one of the biggest issues, So yeah, finding the right opportunities, right? So for some, this break between work life, but sometimes it's an immersion in family, which is not necessarily the time that you have to reflect either. Like, how do you find time for yourself? I think that's important. So yeah, it's when is the right time to reflect, and then to your second point, why can't we do this more often? Well, we can. It's just about making it a priority. So unless we make reflection a priority, it's not going to. If we wait for those free moments in our life that we can take time to reflect, some people may have too much time to reflect, right? So everybody's life is different. But for those people who have a very busy life, demanding life, making sure you schedule that time in is super important. And that means, not being disturbed, and finding an ideal amount of time for yourself, I think is important. Meditating for an hour on the weekend is not as good. Just like exercising for 2 hours on the weekend is not as good as 20 minutes of exercise every day, or 15 minutes of meditation every day. So regularity brings a lot more results. I think, and then, but certainly when there are deeper things, bigger things, allowing yourself the space and time to do them is important as well, and making sure it's in an environment that you're able to shut off and kind of be very reflective. So all of these things help.
Yeah. So I perhaps I was a bit insensitive talking about Christmas in that sense. I realized that it can
it wasn't.
But I do realize that it can be a really stressing time for a lot of people, especially if, I mean, there's a lot of people that has to work extra during the holidays, and that's then you don't have the time to get into this kind of reflection mode. So for all of you in service during the holidays, I mean, thank you for making our societies work. Perhaps I was a bit insensitive.
No, I mean, yeah,
it was a good kind of reflection on my own biases and how you express yourself in certain things. And saying that, a few more things that I do almost every year at the end of the year too. I haven't seen it really as a reflection practice, but I guess it is. It's to work with my yearly alphabet. What have I done during the year?
Yeah.
So on A, certain things. Oh, maybe I went to Athens, or B. Oh, I got a B in science, or whatever it is. Right? Just finding something for every letter, which is really, really difficult when it comes to like Q, Z, Y, etc. But for me it's a nice little tradition, I would say, that I do. Another thing is, I think last year actually we talked about vision boards, and just reviewing your vision board and say, okay, well, what did I enjoy, what happened, what didn't happen, etc. So that's also kind of a nice reflection practice. Also, another thing that I really like is to do this graph of sort of highs and lows during the year. So creating a chart of what has happened during the year, and when was energy really high, when I was kind of low, and then just realizing what was happening in these moments, and then doing what you want with that to create more, perhaps a better curve for yourself. But I really enjoy that as well, to thinking about, these were the highlights, and these moments weren't so good. What happened there? I think it's a nice little exercise to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of things that we use in business that can be applied to personal life, where it's the stop, start, and continue. The things that
traffic light.
Yeah, exactly. What do I want to keep doing? What do I want to stop doing, and what are new things that I want to start doing? I think that those are all great reflective tools, and I think, again, I find sometimes people they don't get deep enough into those exercises, right? So it's like, okay, the first thing that pops into my mind, and then again, it's that habitual thinking. And that's why, again, I emphasize the maybe, those quick reflections. You don't have time to get yourself in the state, or maybe you are fortunately already in a state to reflect. But if you're going to reflect more deeply, setting enough time aside and including enough time to get yourself in the state to reflect, I think, is really important. Otherwise, the obvious things pop up, but sometimes, there are good things to do, like when you're doing an inventory. Like I've accumulated a lot of photos on my phone, and then I'm realizing I want to start deleting more stuff, right? And that can be when I look through photos from the year, and okay, I can delete that, but that process also brings me back to those moments, right? So I think doing I was thinking there's a writer who talked about the pruning shears of revision. Like so pruning things. You have a garden and you prune things away, and it allows new things to grow, right? So taking an inventory for yourself and thinking about, this is the stuff I don't need, and this is what I'd like to have more of, right? And so it's kind of like pruning a bush and allowing new things to grow, right? So the reflective process can be the same, where you if you take an inventory and you reflect on the things that you're going to get rid of and to allow new things in, right? So I think that can also be a really helpful part of the reflection process. I like it anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
But and you're as you mentioned, the vision board, that's something I like to do every year, and I do include in that process reviewing my vision board, what things was I able to really materialize in my life and create in my life, and what things do I still want to work on, or maybe some things I realize actually that's not as important to me anymore, and I'm going to replace it with something new. So, absolutely, and I think it's all part of the process of setting goals and stuff, is to first reflect on where you are now, right? So yeah, I think. Good. We've covered a lot of stuff, right? So
yeah, I guess
the journaling, the gratitude, your alphabet method. I think those are all really great things. And I hope that everyone listening, we've impressed upon you the importance of taking time to reflect. Like, reflection is extremely important, and without it, you just lack the awareness to understand, what's bringing you success, what's bringing you happiness, or what's doing the opposite, right? And knowing where to change and what to change, or even recognizing the need for change. I think taking the time to reflect, and don't be afraid of it. There's often fear is in our periphery, or in the back of our minds, and I find often the things we're most afraid of, when we look directly at it shrinks down. It becomes less of something to fear than when it's kind of lurking in the shadows, sort of thing. Reflecting on your fears and stuff, I think, do that. Look your fear in the eye, and you'll realize it's not nearly as bad as it is if you leave it lurking in the shadows.
And maybe I can, just on a final note, something that I just realized, just to create habits around that in your environment. I mean, asking yourself these kind of questions. So, as you mentioned, how are you doing today? I'm fine, thank you. No, but like, okay, so how am I actually feeling right now? So asking yourself these kind of questions. When you ask others, dig a little bit deeper. So, well, if what's to help others that you care about, let them reflect. So what's making you feel good? Well, this is to ask some follow-up questions, or perhaps as I mentioned with my kids, so what was the highlight of the day? How did it go with your theme? Just to create an environment where you allow for reflection. I think that's also then it becomes more accessible to do it, right?
Yeah, it's funny. You do speak differently with kids, with younger kids, and I noticed that with my girlfriend's daughter as well. When when I'm asking her about things, and I'm naturally getting her to reflect on whether she liked something or didn't like it, or give me, when she's relaying stuff back, she's reflecting, and I think that we could treat ourselves the same way, I guess, because kids are so authentic in the answers they give, right? And I think often we're not. We have practiced answers, or we have practiced responses, or we just want to kind of get that part of it out of the way. It's just small talk, right? And if we're more authentic in the way we accept those prompts to reflect, I think that can be really good for us too.
Yeah, I mean, in the working space, if we want to have a working space that allows for more reflection, well, where can you start? Perhaps by, of course, doing it yourself, but then creating opportunities for your coworkers to reflect, and that can it can start with a few simple questions, right?
Exactly, giving people, like we've talked about feedback before, but if you want good feedback, it needs to be reflected on, right? And so I think if you give people, or you prompt them to reflect, and you give them the space and the time and the opportunity, you'll get more quality feedback as well in all areas of your life. So, yeah, cool. Should we leave it there? I think that's a good place to wrap up.
I think it is, yeah. And I need to go and pick up some people at the airport soon.
Okay, fantastic. Well, look, I hope everyone's listening is enjoying the holidays. This is our last podcast for the year, so wishing everyone, at least for the Gregorian calendar, our Western calendar, it's the new year coming up. So wishing everyone a great start to the new year. I hope it's been a good year, or at least it's come to a positive close. I know it's been, for some people in the world, it's very tumultuous and difficult at any given time. But certainly right now, and I'm wishing everyone lots of happiness, lots of joy, and certainly good health for the new year.
Likewise. Yeah.
All right.
Well said. I'm not going to add anything to that. I think you just covered. Yeah.
All
Thanks,
right.
Peter.
Thanks again. Thanks for everyone who's
for this year.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for everyone who's joined us to listen to our conversations over the year. And we'll leave it at that, and we'll talk to you all in the new year. Take care until then.
See you in 2023.
All right.